What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. This is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. So Lions fans are still probably recovering from the most recent loss to the Washington Commanders in the playoffs, but life has to kind of continue to move on, right? And we kind of have to continue to push forward. And while things didn't end the way that most of us thought they would, we at least get to move into that next phase of like football, which is, again, what will the Lions be doing in the offseason and what are some of the next moves that they have to make? And that's kind of what, Morgan, I kind of want to talk about today is as we move past the loss and move into the next phase for this team, really just trying to look ahead. But before we jump right into that, I know you weren't able to join me yesterday as I kind of gave my thoughts and reactions to the loss. So I wanted to kind of at least give you a few minutes just to, give your thoughts on the game and just kind of, how you're feeling after, again, it's been a couple days at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure we're like all at our different stages of grieving, at this point. What do they say? There's like 5 stages or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had somebody staying in this room, staying with us over the weekend. So shout out to Miko for ripping that alone. I'm sure that wasn't easy, but it did give me another day to process it. And really, we talked about it, I think, or, I either wrote about it or talked about it in a video. It's kind of a blur, but I said if there was a way Washington could easily win this game is if they, dictated like what they wanted to do on offense, and then the Lions turned the ball over, and that's exactly what happened. 4 turnovers. The last one's like whatever to me. The third interception from Goff, just because at that point you're in desperation mode. And but the other ones, it's just a culmination of errors, man. Like it was, you're in a position early in the game to go up 14-3, and you fumble the ball, like Graham Glasgow gets beat. Amon-Ra stumbles on a concept that Dan Campbell said, they run a ton, and they got the matchup they wanted with St. Brown against Bobby Wagner, and he probably would have gotten open, but that's how maddening football can be. You know what I mean? Like a few errors like that can be the difference, because I do think had the Lions gone up 14-3 there, while the defense was on its very last leg after losing Amik Robertson, and we've talked about it. We're not going to talk about it anymore. The injuries are wiped clean now. The year's over. But the defense was on its last leg. I truly believe it was a house of cards. And in hindsight, I do think our minds were a little bit skewed from facing a broken Sam Darnold in Minnesota, there in week 18.
Sure.
Like, wow. I think it's somewhere in the middle. Anzalone definitely helped, get the defense back to, the average where they needed to be. But at the same time, Washington's offense was we knew it was going to be tough to prepare for. We thought it would look a little bit better than that. Yeah, aside from the turnovers, the offense really did what they wanted to do. Jahmyr Gibbs went crazy. I truly think we're going to go into next year and it's just going to be Saquon and Jahmyr Gibbs and then everybody else in terms of like running back tiers. Those two are clearly the best in football, debate a wall. Defensively, they just weren't setting edges. Guys weren't filling quick enough. Like you could tell the motion and the misdirection was playing, a part in slowing down linebackers and safeties from filling. And yeah, it showed, man. People were getting downhill. And like Eckler, Brian Robinson, and then Jaden was obviously doing what he wanted. And we just could not generate any pressure. Like when they rushed 4, they were trying to keep him boxed in. He was hitting his back foot. He was able to go through his progressions. He was unflappable, it seemed. And then when they did blitz, they weren't getting home, man. Like it seemed every time, in my opinion, that the Lions, and I'm going to watch the film tonight. I'm kind of going through it. I'm slow, guys. Sorry. But it seemed like every time that Aaron Glenn dialed up some sort of blitz to try to hurry up Jaden, try to get a takeaway, something of that nature, Washington, Cliff Kingsbury, kudos to him, pulled the right lever, and they got in the right look or the right concept to beat the blitz. Like Terry McLaurin's 58-yard house call there in the second quarter. They blitzed Brian Branch and Jack Campbell from that side of the field. And so, they just had the numbers, Iffy and Vildor didn't make the play. And I'm rambling at this point, but the Lions, credit to Washington. I'm not taking anything away. If there's Commanders fans watching this, they earned that win onto the NFC Championship. It's exciting, I'm sure, where they're at as a franchise compared to a couple years ago. I didn't realize they hadn't won a playoff game since 2005 or whatever it was. I had no idea.
Either. It checks out, but that's one of those things that you just don't register until it's actually said.
That's crazy. Yeah. So respect. I got, trust me, we were there last year, man. It was an incredible feeling, an incredible run. But yeah, overall, just Washington brought it. The Lions beat the Lions offensively, which is the maddening part, I think. And we're At the end of the day, I'm going to write an article about this. I'm trying because I think it's going to be cathartic, and I do think people need to hear it. But the Lions are set up for long-term success. They've talked about that from the jump, man. Brad and Dan have. They want to be competitive every single year, and they are. Like, you see the core of this team. Ultimately, every year, 31 out of 32 fan bases and teams experience this feeling. It's just, at what point do you do it? Like, right? Like,
Yeah.
the Lions were one step closer last year, and in my opinion, that pain still hurt more than this. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think because we were one step closer, but ultimately, 31 out of 32, they experience this feeling. It's just what flavor, and at what point of the season. You know what I mean? So we got to get
No,
used to it as a fan base. That's kind of where I'll end my rant, right? Like, we really got to get used to it as a fan base, because I do think this team is going to be competitive every year. And I do think they're on track to win that game in February one day. But
mm-hmm.
ultimately, you see it. Like, look at Lamar Jackson, right? Like, he's clearly one of the best players in football. Watching that Baltimore game, I was like, this is tough. And I'm sure you guys, if you watched the game, you saw how it shook out. Probably could have won the game, and a lot of different, if that, you run that
Yeah.
simulation back a couple other times. But Lamar's on like a Peyton Manning track. Like, Peyton Manning was one of the best in the game. It's just hard. I guess that's where I'm at, like, it's
Yeah.
hard, and we got to get used to this, because this is a different flavor of the pain, right? Like, I think we were so used to, all right, it's week 17, like, this is a fun little year. We won 7 games,
I was
let's
gonna say, like, I think there's a lot of fans that are still trying to adjust to the fact that, like, at least we're not talking about the draft in November.
exactly. Right? That's what I want to.
There's
It's not all for naught. It's a great point,
right.
Miko. It's not all for naught, man. Still you won the North second year in a row, won 15 games. Like, enjoy it. Yes, it sucks. That was a kick in the teeth, but man, enjoy it still. I know that's tough, but damn.
Yeah, and I want to build off of what you were saying, because obviously Dan met with the media today, in his like kind of like last interview of the season before he kind of goes into off-season mode and things of that nature. But even he talked about, again, like, the Lions just didn't bring it, to your point, right? Like, even if I think he had said something along the lines of, even if they had brought their B game,
I
right,
did say
they
that.
probably win that game. And so there is a lot of, again, not to take anything away from Washington, but it's so obvious in watching that game that the Lions just didn't play their best brand of football, right? When it comes to the turnovers, when it comes down to their execution on the defensive side. These are all things that, like I said, that I talked about yesterday in the video that I posted, and kind of just giving my thoughts on the loss. So, we're not going to, stress that point too much. But like you said, Morgan, this team is set up for future success. And that, continued success starts this week. And, when we look at one of the first things that's what's next for this team, we have to start with the coaching staff, because obviously Dan's going to be here for a long time, right? Contrary to like a weird group of people in this fan base that think otherwise, Dan's here to stay. But the other two offensive coordinators, there's a lot of debate going on, for good reason, of both of these coaches possibly, this being their last ride. Obviously, Aaron Glenn is getting a lot of attention, and he's, I've seen reports out there that he could possibly be the front runner for the New York Jets job if he wants it. Reports are going out there that the Las Vegas Raiders are seemingly going all in on Ben Johnson. We'll see if that's actually appealing to him. But when you, again, taking reports out of it, maybe, or maybe just not putting too much on the reports, what is your overall feeling about both of these coordinators and this coaching staff as a whole? Like, what do you expect this coaching staff to look like kind of going forward?
Well, I do expect, I think Dan said that too in his media availability today. He expects to lose them both, but he hasn't gotten any concrete word, or neither have we, for, clarification. But I think, I almost said Oakland, my bad. The Raiders are going all in on Ben Johnson. I think he'll take that. That seems like it's pretty good. They'll have an understanding in place that, they're tearing it down. And it sounds like he might have a say-so in like what GM they bring in terms of Lance Newmark, if you guys remember that name. And then I think AG is just going to, maybe Ben has like a small chance he could return if some things don't break his way. But I think AG is gone, man, just because I think he's going to take, whether it's New Orleans or the Jets or whatever, he believes in himself. And I would too. He's a fantastic coach, great human being by all accounts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they're going to lose both. But this is where Dan Campbell makes his money, man. We've seen him time and again, like, getting rid of, some people and bringing in the right people and retaining the right people. So I fully trust him to, he had some interesting comments. Go watch that media availability from today about how he would go about bringing in someone from offensively, because he makes it clear. He's like, this is my thing too. Like, I'm much more involved offensively, and so is Goff. He talked about that at pretty good, at length too. So yeah, I think they're going to lose both. But what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I think if there is a chance of anyone staying, it is Ben Johnson. I think and I've kind of been saying this the whole time. I think for Ben Johnson to leave, it has to be the perfect storm, right? It has to be right team, right leadership, and right situation that he's going into in terms of expectation. Ben Johnson is will be a first time head coach, just like he was a first time offensive coordinator. While I think he's capable of igniting any offense that he goes into, it's still probably going to take him time if it's not already a ready-made situation. No matter who's the quarterback, no matter what your offensive line skill players look like, there's still going to be that adjustment period. So I think Ben is going to be much more selective, right? I can definitely see Chicago and Las Vegas going all in on him, but like you said, if he doesn't feel like he has, the proper partnership with the GM, or if he doesn't have the proper, buy-in from ownership on what it's going to take to rebuild or continue to build either of those organizations out to be a winning organization, then yeah, I could see him basically pass on both those situations and say like, no, I'll just come back to Detroit and, we'll run it back again. AG, like you said, it feels like a done deal. And I, again, talked about this in a previous video when talking about both coaches and their chances of taking other positions. The opportunity to get a head coach as a minority in the NFL is very, very rare. There's already only 32 jobs in the NFL. And at the same time, there's only so many chances that you get to bite at that apple to be able to prove that you're capable of doing the job. And the stars seem to have aligned in such a way where AG has two great candidates, in my opinion, when you talk about the Jets and the Saints. Obviously, New Orleans, he's super familiar with them in terms of already having coached there. I believe he played there as well. And so there's a lot of familiarity with the ownership, the people in charge, the city. There's a lot there. And I think, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I think AG could go there and help reset expectations for what it's going to take to be able to contend in the NFC South, which, again, is a much more likely chance of him being able to build a winner, just because of how everyone from the NFC South feels like they've either restarted recently or they're kind of stuck in the mud. It's one of those two. The Jets are interesting. Obviously, again, that's the place that he was drafted by. That's the place where he played a long time and really made a name for himself. And I think they have obviously the better defense. So again, going into a situation where he would have one side of the ball figured out easily. I just don't know if he wants the circus that is New York, right? Not just the franchise, but New York as a media outlet. That just doesn't seem like it might be all that appealing to AG. But again, like I said, I agree with you. I think there's a very strong chance that both coaches could be gone, and that's going to put a lot of stress on Dan Campbell and being able to find those replacements. But like you said, he's done it before, more so with obviously position groups, and we've seen him be able to make good hires there. There's no reason to think that he couldn't do the same thing with coordinators when you talk about the offense and the defense.
Yeah, no doubt. This is where the relationships and his wealth of experience as both as a player and as a coach are going to pay dividends. So I'm not tripping about that. Yeah, I think it's almost a done deal. I think we'll hopefully get the news soonish, and then I don't think he's going to rush either process to bring in an OC or a defensive coordinator. So I think he'll take his time and make sure it's the right guy, and we got to trust him at this point, man. You got to trust him and Brad. They've earned it.
I was going to say, and speaking of trusting Brad, this is his time of season, right? This is Brad Holmes' season at this point when we start talking about the roster, because that's obviously, once we get kind of confirmation on what's going to happen with the coaching staff, a lot of people are going to, shift their attention to this roster. And this is a roster that going into the season, I think everyone felt really good about. I think the big question mark going into the season was, okay, how good are your corners going to be? Because obviously you were getting, two rookies that were joining that room in Ennis Rakestraw and Terrion Arnold. Ennis Rakestraw Jr. didn't get to play a whole lot. Terrion had a very, very up and down, some people would even say very underwhelming rookie season. But then on top of that, you have all the injuries that just hit this defense. And I think it really exposed just how thin this roster is when it comes to the defensive side of the football, specifically on the defensive line. And you start to realize outside of your starting group that there's not a whole lot there. And again, guys did an admirable job coming in, filling in, and doing things like that. But there's a lot to do with this roster, Morgan. Let's just start with this right here. When you look at the roster, the Lions have a couple guys that are either going into free agency that may be back, that may not. Can you give me a couple guys that you at least are looking at that you're like, hey, these guys absolutely should come back, as well as a couple guys where you're like, you know what, maybe the Lions are, it's time for these Lions to kind of move on from these guys as well.
Sure. So there's a comprehensive list Jeremy put together over at prideofdetroit.com. Definitely check that out if you're just looking for like a, breaking it down categorically from unrestricted free agents, restricted, ERFAs, you name it, the exclusive rights guys. Short list though that I'm looking at, like some of these are just going to be, it's just going to be some roster churn. A couple that I would like to see the Lions make earnest attempts to bring back in the fold: Levi Onwuzurike and Derek Barnes. I don't think either of those will break the bank, just for different reasons. Obviously, unfortunately for Barnes, he had the injury earlier in the year where he was trending to maybe make some real money, because he could have helped in the divisional round. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
Just being the athlete that he is and the edge setter and you name it, the pursuer of the football. Levi played well, especially, he stepped up big, played a lot of snaps when Aleem went down, and it was just him and Reeder in there a lot of the time holding down the fort. He was kicking outside. So I think you definitely want to bring Levi back. I think you make an attempt to bring Carlton Davis back, because I don't care what anyone says, prior to him getting hurt, man, that was a huge blow, like almost akin to losing Aleem, because he was arguably one of the best cornerbacks in football, was a heck of a tackler, would have, again, helped against the Commanders as a force player on the edge, because they stretch you out so much horizontally with the way Cliff Kingsbury operates that offense. Puts a lot of stress on you horizontally, man. So that's really the three I would like them to make some earnest attempts at bringing back. A few, like I like Iffy, man. I think Ifatu Melifonwu is a special player, special talent. Just shout out Ryan Matthews, but your best ability is your availability, and it just hasn't been there. Like even the last, the game against Washington, BB gets banged up, and you have Maurice Norris out there, and then Stanley Jean Oliver or whatever. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, but that was part of the, both of those guys were on the field for the too many men penalty. That was a backbreaker in the second half. So yeah, I think if he's probably some team might pay him a good little chunk of change to get him on their roster for 2 or 3 years, but I think he's going to price himself out of the Lions. And I think you can upgrade on your swing tackle. Like Dan Skipper's a fine player, but hopefully, we'll see what happens with Giovanni Manu's development. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of free agents that are really catching my eye right about now. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You said the 3 names that I would have high on my priority list in Derek Barnes, Levi Onwuzurike, and Carlton Davis. I think all 3 of those players played well enough to really like solidify them being on this roster for the long-term future of this team. Obviously, Derek Barnes, like you said, was trending in the right direction. Injury kind of derails that. I thought Levi played great, right? And specifically in being able to stay healthy and continuing to just kind of ascend. And we didn't, honestly, I feel like we didn't get to see the best version of Levi in terms of just because he didn't get to play next to Aleem for a full season. He didn't get to play opposite Aiden for much of the season. And so there was a lot of things that were going on with the roster where I still think Levi has a lot of potential that he can tap into. He is someone else that I would like really love to see the Lions come back or bring back next season. And I'm with you fully on Carlton Davis. He was CB1, and I think he was such a leader for the secondary. So if there is something that can be had about bringing him back, I would love to see that. Another name that I'll throw out there as a 4th is Tim Patrick. I loved what Tim Patrick brought to this offense. If they can bring him back on a really like cap friendly deal that again pays him what he's worth and what he's what he was able to contribute to this team, would love to see Tim Patrick come back. A couple guys that I would be fine with letting walk are, again, you said it yourself, Ifatu Melifonwu. As much as I love Iffy, like you said, availability is the best ability, and his ability to not remain healthy is not his fault, but it's just you can't continue to put chips in that bucket and then also try to find like backfill that position because you think or know that he's going to be injured at some point. I do think he will find somewhere else to latch onto because he is such a talent, right? Athletically, what he's capable of doing and on the variety of ways he's able to play in the secondary. I'm also kind of fine with the Lions passing on bringing Marcus Davenport back. Again, another guy that just the history of injuries he was never really able to shake it. And so I'm kind of fine with them passing on him. John Kaminsky is someone else that I was fine with him making the roster, but after seeing what Al-Qadim Muhammad brought, again, he's someone else that's a free agent. I wouldn't be opposed to them bringing back Al-Qadim Muhammad over John Kaminsky. Like I think that's he's young enough, and there's a lot there that I think you could kind of develop. And is again, if you get the rest of that defensive line healthy, you might be able to tap into that potential a little bit more.
Yeah, Muhammad is someone I would love for them to bring back and just be a part of the rotation. Maybe not seeing 60 snaps because they're missing everybody on the edge and on the interior, but
Mm-hmm.
20 snaps where he can, use because he's an effort player, man. High effort. He's got some good tools. So yeah, that's a player where I would like to bring back that could be a part of the rotation. There's not a ton of holes on the roster. Obviously, it's built for the long term, man. The core is here. It's only going to get better. You're getting another year for all these players that are borderline, Pro Bowlers, a lot of all pros. So it's that leads in, I guess our last point, the early expectations. I expect this team to be right back where 15 games might be a stretch at first glance. The schedule looks tough, but as we know,
Yeah.
those things change after, during the course of an off season and how things shake out. But are they going to win 15 games? No, but do I expect them to be in contention to once again win the NFC North for a third straight time? You're dang right I do. So, and hopefully, I don't know. You just gotta. It's another strike, and hopefully another chance at the ultimate goal in February, right? Like that's got to be it's tough to expect that every single year, but the way they wanted to set this up, the leadership at this in the organization, they wanted to be in the mix every single year, and they are they're there, Miko, right? Like they're
Yeah.
going to be.
I wouldn't even say it's hard to expect that. That is the expectation.
Sure.
I'm sorry if you feel a little shaky about the list of opponents and things like that. That is the expectation that this team has put forward. You won the division in back-to-back seasons. You won the division one year where you didn't have the best roster going into the season, but yet again still played really well and played well enough to win the division. And yes, Minnesota dealt with some injuries, but again, you still played well enough. And then the inverse kind of happens this year. You deal with a ton of injuries and you still go out there and win the division. So yes, I expect going into this offseason, early expectation is to win the division at the very least. And that's always going to be, I think, this team's first and foremost goal is to win the division because that guarantees you a trip to the dance. And that's what you have to be able to do. Everything else, like we were just saying, you deal with your free agents, you pick your primary players that you're trying to keep. And after that, you look at the roster and you figure out some holes that you need to plug. Like we said, defensive line, I've rarely gone into draft season and been like, hey, Brad has to prioritize this position because we know the mindset of Brad Holmes and this team. It's best player available, best player available, best player available. This is the one time that I'm probably going to be a little bit of a stickler, Morgan, where I'm like, you got to get defensive line help. Interior, edge play, they just need it. They need it so badly in terms of players that can play behind Aiden and Aleem and DJ Reader, as well as just you need some more development pieces. And I think if the Lions can do that, like I said, they're able to knock off that first goal, which is, again, winning the division and at least getting themselves to the playoffs because that is the expectation that they've set forth the last couple seasons.
Yep, I totally agree with you on the D line. They need to get stronger there. Just more depth. Dan joked, like, can you have enough depth on defense? And I was like, man, maybe not, because you look what happened to the Lions this year, and hopefully that's an anomaly. But yeah, you're going to get a lot of players back in the fold. Like, say you add a first round edge rusher, right, to play opposite of Aiden, and then you get a lean back, and you have DJ Reader, and you have Levi Onwuzurike, and you have Aiden Hutchinson, and that's where you're back to like, okay, this defense could be a top flight defense again because the dudes are there, all pro safety. Brian Branch probably should have been an all pro safety. Figure out corner. The holes aren't there. You're getting the dang near the entire offense back. You got a couple question marks on the offensive line that you need to re-up. But yeah. And the good thing is when you play late like this, guys, like we're a stone's throw away from the free agency and the draft. You know what I mean? So
yeah, there's a lot of work that we got to do now in terms of like getting ourselves familiar with who's going to be available and what the draft is going to look like. So it's going, like I said, the season's not ending the way we thought it would. The content that we're about to start making over the next couple weeks is going to look a lot different, but that's life in the NFL. And I think, again, we're going to be shifting gears. We're going to start talking a lot more free agency. We're going to start talking a lot more player evaluations and things like that. And it's going to still be, we're going to try to make this an exciting offseason for you guys. So like always, make sure that you guys are plugged into prideofdetroit.com because that is where you're going to be able to get all the news on, again, what is happening with our coordinators. That's going to be where you're going to be able to find all the news in terms of what the Lions may be able to be maybe thinking when it comes to free agency. And as well as we start to move into draft season, you're going to get a lot of stuff from Eric in terms of draft. So it's always nice to be plugged in when it comes down to the website in that regard. And then again, staying locked in on over here on the YouTube channel, because like I said, Morgan and I are still going to be trying to do videos weekly. Maybe we do a few more film studies. Maybe we do a little bit more preparation in terms of free agency and the draft. And like I said, we'll definitely do some player evaluations as well. So definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, because that's going to help you stay locked in with all the content that we're going to be pushing out this off season. With all of that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.